We now move on to our final speaker, who's Dr. Bruce Horton from MWH. Bruce is a co-author of BEST and is an environmental economist with over 10 years' experience in the public and private sector, predominantly in the water sector. At MWH, he's worked on a variety of social cost-benefit analyses, valuation of non-market impacts, implementing the ecosystem services approach, climate change, carbon management and water resource management planning, which ought to keep him pretty busy with all of that, I think. He's particularly interested in better value. So that's what he's going to talk about this afternoon. SuDS and better value. And with the accompaniment of the hooters on the river and the helicopter, I'd like to welcome Bruce Horton to the podium.
Thanks. So, we all know SuDS are great. And none of us need to be convinced about that. But obviously, I think if we're going to convince others, people out there, then we need to make a strong business case. So like it or not, we're all going to have to become economists. But don't worry, it's really, really easy, okay?
We always
said to the economist. It is. You are much cleverer than most of the economists I know, don't worry. So SuDS might be cheaper than conventional solutions, or they might be more expensive. But costs are only one side of the equation. I think if we want to make an informed decision, if we want to get the best value solution, we need to understand the costs and compare these to the benefits. So we need to understand both sides of the equation. So when we started doing BEST, one of the things we talked about when we were building the evidence that Chris talked about earlier, we went and talked to people and said, what are you doing at the moment? How are you assessing benefits at the moment? And it became clear to us quite quickly, and luckily provided a good justification for doing the BEST project, that it wasn't being done comprehensively or consistently. And we asked people, are you assessing the multiple benefits? Yeah, well, a lot of us are. Quite a few of us are. Those are the kind of the highest bars. Are you describing them? Are you expressing them in words? All these wonderful benefits of SuDS. So yeah, quite a few people are doing that, especially on the left for things like flood risk and water quality. Less so as you move on to the right for things like air quality, urban heat island and health. Are you actually quantifying these benefits? Saying how much they're worth to people? Not really. We're not really doing that so much. Well, in a few cases. And are you monetizing them? Hardly anyone at all. Even for the key benefits that we're well aware of, like flood risk and water quality. So part of the justification for BEST was to try and build some of the evidence to help people in this area. So how does valuation, monetary valuation fit into BEST? Well, Chris kind of said this, but for each impact category, so there's about 20 or more in BEST, for each of those, this is an example for flooding, we've got what's called an impact pathway or a logic chain. This is kind of core to government guidance in economic valuation in this area, economic assessment and appraisal. So we need to understand really what SuDS we're putting in the ground, what are we actually doing, what are we changing, what impact does that have, what does that actually do in terms of the physical environment, what impacts does that have, what are the outcomes, and finally, what's the value of those outcomes. So valuation is really the last sort of bit of the puzzle, and to some extent it's almost the easy bit in many cases, because we've got values for lots of impacts, like carbon. You know, the government's done values for that. So, but the tricky bit is trying to make sure we've got a robust and reliable chain for each of the benefit categories that we can say, yeah, we think that's robust and reliable, and you can use that, and you can add valuation onto the end. Okay, so for the economists out there, there's a few of you. We've borrowed shamelessly from a whole range of areas in terms of the valuation approaches that we actually use. So there are things like the traded price of carbon, for example, in terms for carbon benefits, which is based on marginal abatement costs, what we need to reduce carbon by, how much we need to reduce it by to meet the Climate Change Act, the targets that Lord Krebs talks about. Air quality, we've borrowed values from the Department of Health for damage costs of health impacts as a result of air pollution. Flooding, we've borrowed from the multicoloured manual that many of you will be familiar with. Water quality, we've used values from the Environment Agency, the National Benefits Survey that they did for the Water Framework Directive. So we've borrowed values from different places, but I think the key thing is we've tried to embed within BEST the most reliable and robust valuation evidence that's out there for each of these categories. Just to go in a bit more detail for some of them. This is all in the guidance and embedded within the tool, but the key thing really is linking the quantifiable changes as a result of SuDS and the impacts that generates in terms of on the ground and adding values on top of that. So we've just recently been able to kind of monetize the benefits of education. It's not entirely robust, and this is one of the reasons we've got confidence scores in there. But we do know that SuDS can have beneficial impacts in terms of education, so we've tried to bring in the very latest evidence in terms of that. But it all depends on actually understanding, describing and quantifying some of these benefits in the first place. Just to run through some brief examples, because this all sounds great and it also looks lovely, but how have we actually used it? So just two brief examples, really. This is a case study where we've applied BEST. This is an area just outside Leeds city centre. Main driver here was water quality from pollution, so there's some CSOs in the area. If you see the red dots on the picture, those are the CSOs spills. And so one of the first stages was to look around the area, say, yeah, it's an area with lots of potential opportunities for SuDS. There's some big wide roads, there's some quite big houses, there's some private land where it might be amenable to different SuDS solutions. And then we came up with different options. So this is one of the things about the BEST tool is that Chris mentioned, is that you can actually use it to compare different options. So we have got broadly two conventional type solutions, one with more storage than the other, and two SuDS-based solutions, one where only on public land, one where they're also on private property. We've compared, looked at the SuDS measures within each of those, taken the impact pathway approach that I talked about earlier, and compared the options and the benefits you get from each of those. And these are just some of the SuDS features and the location. We've just mapped them onto the location for that area. And so what does BEST come up with? Well, there's the comparison tool. You've got the two conventional solutions on the left and the SuDS solutions on the right. So the blue bars are the cost. So the cost of the more conventional solutions was either less than or comparable to the SuDS solutions in this case. The benefits are the red bars. So you can see the benefits in terms of the SuDS solutions, as you would expect, are higher than the sort of more conventional solutions. And indeed, the green bars just show you the difference, so the net present value in this case. And it was only, for this particular case study, it was only the third solution, so the SuDS on public land, where the net present value was positive. But I think the point is that we've used BEST to be able to make an economic argument for SuDS in this location. Second case study, this is Glasgow City Centre. For those of you that are familiar with it, it all kind of floods quite badly, so flooding was the main driver here. This is to help the City Council with their surface water management plan. It all kind of runs down towards the River Clyde, which is at the bottom there. So lots of SuDS-type solutions, linking it more broadly with green infrastructure more generally, kind of green corridors all running down towards the Clyde. And again, we've applied BEST to this case study. I won't bore you with all the impact categories and all the individual sheets, but the answer is 2.6, which is great. So that's the benefit-cost ratio. So the benefits are more than twice as high as the costs in this case. And even after confidence, still 2.3. Even if we do sensitivity analysis, low or high, it's still greater than 1. So it's a good solution. You get the right answer under any of the scenarios in this case. So again, we've been able to use BEST to make an economic case for more sustainable approaches to drainage. And that's just a pie chart showing you the different categories that we looked at. So as flooding, as we would have expected, is the main driver in this case. So the bulk of the benefits are around flood risk reduction. And because there's a lot of commercial property, a lot of retail outlets in the area that were that get frequently flooded. So a lot of benefits in terms of that. But some significant benefits from elsewhere as well. So things like enabling future development, creating more capacity, more headroom, amenity, water quality, and carbon as well. So some other significant benefits. So just to summarise, Chris had 5 summary points. I've whittled it down to 3, which is all I can cope with really. But first one, I think the value of any drainage solution depends on the cost and the benefits. So if we want to get the best value solutions, we need to understand the benefits as well. In fact, I'd go further. If we don't assess the benefits, there's a real danger we'll make the wrong decision. If we only look at costs, we will either underinvest or overinvest. So we need to understand the benefits as well. Best economists are often criticised for only looking at efficiency. What's the most efficient solution? The good thing about BEST is, and the thing that we wanted to build in from the start, Chris mentioned, is that it also looks at who benefits. And that's really important in terms of conversations. And a lot of people saying, well, this is great. We know SuDS gives us a load of benefits, but so what? I've got to pay for it. Well, if you can understand who benefits, then you can talk to those people and bring them into the conversation. And then there may lead to new funding opportunities, so potentially as well. So I think there's more to do. Chris mentioned we're doing some updates. We've got an update plan for next year. I think there's some important categories that we're really struggling with valuation and quantification, like the flexibility in climate change adaptation, like the urban heat island, the health benefits associated with the urban heat island effect, perhaps noise attenuation. Does SuDS do anything for noise attenuation? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty convinced it's going to be in the next version of BEST. So that's it. Thank you very much. If you want to know more, Chris has already put this up. And did he mention it's free? Thank you.